morning. I would like to welcome my listeners and viewers in the United States and all around the world. I am Vince Rocco in New York, and it is Tuesday morning, so let's go behind the headlines and get the real story. This is Talking New York Real Estate. And up front today, the author of the book, Living the High Life, How Smart Co-op and Condo Owners Protect Themselves and Their Investments, says the book is a resource for owners and board members. The book is to inspire and motivate you to take an active role in shaping the destiny of what is likely to be your largest investment, your primary home. The book will guide you to an invaluable volunteer and fiduciary as you work to make your own home and your neighbor's home safer, more sustainable, and more profitable. Living the High Life addresses some of the more common issues that apartment and building owners face and the solutions that have proven most effective and affordable. The book also offers valuable tools and tips that can be used to prepare, organize, execute, and even fund upcoming projects. Also at this hour, we will discuss the basics of living in these buildings, the many co-op and condo documents and board requirements. The goal is to provide you with the resources you need to be a more effective co-op or condo board member or owner. The author of this book is here today with me, and we will discuss all of it. And we will have all that and so much more as Talking New York Real Estate gets underway on this Tuesday morning. And in the news this morning, even as New York City is undergoing its worst housing crunch in decades, there are still some surprising pockets of Manhattan where rents have actually declined over the past year. That is according to a new report from StreetEasy released last Wednesday, which found that asking rents are falling across parts of the borough, even as they saw a spike in Brooklyn and even a bigger one in Queens. Manhattan median rent dropped 1% over last year to hit $4,257 per month in February. Of the 12 neighborhoods in Manhattan that saw year-over-year declines, the steepest drop was in Battery Park City, followed by Greenwich Village, Gramercy Park, the Lower East Side, and the Upper West Side. The plan to charge drivers entering certain parts of Manhattan received final approval on Wednesday, signaling the imminent start of the country's first congestion pricing program. The board of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority voted 11-1 to approve the toll rates for the program, which includes a fee of $15 for passengers and small commercial vehicles entering below 60th Street from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. And New York City now has a government agency dedicated to protecting tenants. Mayor Eric Adams last week launched the city's first ever tenant protection cabinet, a new multi-agency team that will create policies and long-term strategies to ensure safer, more equitable housing conditions for all New Yorkers. And finally, the team behind New York's iconic restaurant Delmonico's is opening a new restaurant in NoHo. It is a fine dining Italian restaurant called Tucci, named after one of the original owners of Delmonico's, and it will offer contemporary Italian cuisine inspired by dishes found in northern and southern Italy from chef Edward Hong. It is located at 643 Broadway. Tucci officially opened on Friday, March 15th. And with me today are Tina Larson, the author of the book, Living the High Life, and CEO of the Folsom Group, Ben Willig, Director of Sales, Ellerben Forbes Global Properties, and Dylan Pichulik, CEO of XL Property Management.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Okay, everybody, we're back. So I'm going to talk today to the author of this book, as I said in the opening, Living the High Life, How Smart Co-op and Condo Owners Protect Themselves, or how they should protect themselves with their investments, because as we know, investing in any kind of apartment here in New York City or even a townhouse is very expensive, and it's our primary, source of or asset rather. So somewhere down the road, when we want to sell it, we make profit. So Tina, let me start with you. You also head up the Folsom Group. We'll talk about the book in a second, but give us a little bit about what that group is, what the dynamic of the group is, and what you do, what services you provide to the co-op and condo owners and building boards out there.
Thank you, Rocco. Vince, so...
You can call me Rocco. That's okay. Everybody else.
I like it. He's got the T-shirt to go with it.
I do.
Yeah. So the Folsom Group is really, it's a consulting firm that I started together with my husband because we took over our own board. And my husband
Of a co-op.
of a co-op.
Okay.
We bought in 2004. In 2010, we got the annual maintenance increase letter from the board, and we said, this doesn't make sense. There's no inflation in 2010. So we did what we know from Wall Street, which is I was a business analyst. My husband was an economist, and we went out and got financial statements from other buildings. And once we had enough data to compare to, that's the problem with a lot of boards. They see their own financial statements, but they don't know if anything is high, low, or normal. So we were able to save our own building, $340,000 in the first 3 years.
Wow.
When we were out networking, instead of introducing myself as a financial advisor, because you all know how much everybody in New York wants to meet another financial advisor, I introduced myself as I'm Tina Larson, and I helped my co-op save $340,000.
Yeah. So you provide that service to any building that needs that kind of help from a financial perspective. What about other board issues? You know, there are other things that board members can sometimes get stuck on. You know, one of the things I say all the time is boards are made up of just normal, everyday, living people here in New York who happen to own a share in a co-op or, you know, an owner of a condo. But they're not financial gurus. They're not legal gurus. They don't really know anything about running anything, right? Other than maybe they're great at their jobs, correct? No offense meant. But so you get all these people together and try to put a building on the right track, and oftentimes it doesn't really work. So, you know, what can co-op and condo owners do from a board member perspective to understand what is needed and understand how to keep things on track? Like Tina said, she saved her building $340,000 in 3 years. That's a lot of money. Why, first of all, then, do things get out of control? And second of all, how can you rein that in if you're not ready to hire the financial consultant?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and thanks again for having me here. And I think I'm excited to be here today because the first thing is I know a lot. I know a few layers deeper of the onion than most, but I certainly do not know everything. And I think the sooner that everybody who's on the board and everybody who's involved can admit, you know, that, hey, there's a lot of things we don't know and we need to learn and we need to consult some of the different, you know, professionals. You know, that is just really the first, you know, most helpful thing. I see a lot of people think they know things and get very heated and deep-seated in their, you know, just belief system around something. And then it creates, you know, dispute and a lack of friction because you have to have votes in order to get anything, you know, moving forward. So getting good diversity on the board, I think, is important first. So have a, you know, attorney with experience, have someone who has financial experience, have someone who has the real estate experience side of things, because I think that diversity is going to be most helpful first instead of everybody being the same, you know, set of, you know, people. Second, really make sure that, you know, one of the first things you need to do is what management company do you have in place and do you trust, you know, their recommendations? We were talking a little bit, you know, about that. And you know, after that, who are the other professionals, either that those people on the board know, that like you just mentioned, you know, is it architects, expediters, energy, you know, people, you know, financial folks, there's like the list goes on. And you have to be able to trust those people, listen, and be able to work through, I think, you know, all of that. So first, you know, really just, you know, put your ego at the door and set aside. And I'm looking forward to learning from the people here today, too.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned managing agents. So Dylan, you run a company, XL Real Property. What you know, from a managing agent perspective, what are some of the issues you have when you're talking to board members or other shareholders on a co-op or unit owners on a condo? What are the things that can be the most perplexing to try and get everybody? You know, Ben mentions picking the right, you know, people for the right positions. Sometimes that's easier than it is, you know, and sometimes it's not. Easier said than done, and sometimes it's not. But what are some of the perplexing issues that you have or had when you're trying to talk to everybody involved in keeping a building running smoothly? I mean, look, I lived in co-ops. I've owned co-ops. I've owned condos. I've lived in rental buildings. You know, so I get how difficult it is to run a building or to keep everybody happy. And we'll talk about residents later. But what are some of the perplexing issues that you've had in dealing with people on the board, for example?
Right, absolutely. So as far as that's concerned, I think a lot of people decide they're going to join the board because they've got some sort of agenda. That some single, they're like single issue voters. They've got some agenda that they want to have pushed forward, and they're joining the board in a lot of cases only to push forward that agenda. So let's say you're a new parent and all you want is a kid's playroom in the building. And oftentimes they're ignoring the overall building as a whole and the issues that you're facing as a building in order to kind of ram down the throats of the rest of the board so that we can move forward on that topic. When Excel started, we decided we were going to manage some condo and co-op buildings. So we started off, managing rental buildings, and we managed some condo buildings. And I always found it shocking the amount of people who only wanted their agenda fulfilled and nothing else. I had this building up in Harlem, and the building was about maybe $200,000 in debt. And one board member's biggest issue with the building was the color of the flowers for spring planting. We had leaks everywhere. 2 apartments were being foreclosed on.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sitting there like, okay, we want the flowers as well. We all agree that you've got a very you're keen to purple flowers or whatever, but we can't pay our gas bill this month. What are we going to do? And the level, back to Ben's point, the level of passion that people have for these issues that are irrelevant to everything else going on and having the building operate smoothly, it's shocking.
Well, listen, I live in a building, and I've been in my building 20 years, okay? And when I first moved into the building, I hated the lobby. Hated. Whoever the decorating committee was, sucked. A year ago, they embarked on this renovation of the lobby, okay? I live in a pre-war building, 100 units. It's not grand. It's not big, whatever. It took like 9 months to get wallpaper up and painting and whatever else, okay? Now, that's been done for months. And we're sitting there still waiting because they're fighting over the furniture choices in the lobby and the wall hangings in the lobby. And I'm like, okay, if I'm waiting for somebody, I need a place to sit down.
Yeah.
Get me a chair, okay? I need something. What does it take? Why are they fighting over furniture? Decorating committees, whatever it is? I don't know. Tina, in what ways can condo owners participate in the decision-making process, okay? We all know that boards are boards, people are people in the building. There are meetings, but most people don't go to meetings. How can shareholders or unit owners in condos participate in decisions in buildings? How should they?
The only way, it's a great question, but the only way is to nominate yourself for the board. I mean, the only way you're going to have any kind of say is to nominate yourself to the board or committees. There are committees too, of course.
Well, the decorating committee in my building, I don't know what they're doing. It's 10 months.
It might not even be their fault, though. It's probably just the inertia of the committee.
I'm not so sure.
Oh, or maybe it is her fault.
I know one person. Well, I shouldn't say that. I know one person on the committee, and
the one thing that my firm never gets involved in is design.
okay.
Yeah. We can help boards get a vendor that will do exactly the same design for a more affordable price. We can do that. When it comes to design itself, it is such a heated topic that we stay away from it. I mean, it is a nightmare, as you said.
Well, you don't want to get involved in people trying to make decisions. I get it, but we have to set up processes. So, Ben, from your board perspective, what are some of the responsibilities that effective boards have in place to run buildings? Or what should they be?
Well, great question, and I will echo the committee point, as well. That was something that wasn't in place in one of my last buildings when I was on my co-op board, and I really fought hard because there was a lot of angst between the current residents and the board. And by putting committees in place, and I think good committees in place, it got a lot more people involved, a lot more people understanding, and it got the building as a whole on the same page there. So I do think that's very effective, that if your building doesn't have one, to offer that up, as a suggestion. And Vince, to your point, what the building is responsible for, I mean, to me, the North Star of every building, and I echo this in board meetings and everything, is, whatever is best for the building is our North Star, right? So, you got to take all other personal agendas and everything out of it. So whatever's best for the building is our North Star. We have to lead with that. What does that actually mean, and what does that translate to?
Right.
You have to, approve the budgets, and I could go into, details about, I think, smart, budgeting and financial planning and, things of that nature. Choosing your vendors and negotiating prices and things like that. A lot of people don't know they can do things like negotiate union contracts and all that sort of stuff. So ensuring the financial stability both now and in the future for the building, and then also just the building health, that you don't want the building falling apart, are really what I think all the main responsibilities kind of flow into. And then there's a lot of the sub things that, that come from that. The building attorney, adhering to the offering plan. With all these things, we forget, I think boards forget sometimes that, there is an offering plan that is registered with the Attorney General, and it is our job to enforce that, not create, different things that go off of that. And I've seen and I've corrected many boards that try and give me different information, and I'll quote the offering plan, and very quickly they have to, back off of certain things. And there's some interesting examples of that. So.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you, especially when buildings first start up. I've sold lots and lots of new condo developments through the years, and I always direct people to the offering plan. It's in the book. Read the book, follow the instructions in the book, whatever. Dylan, based on what Ben just said, how did you see participation from residents in buildings getting, if they didn't elect themselves to the board, because not everybody can be on a board, 8 seats, 9 seats, depending on the size of the building, how else can residents in buildings that you manage kind of have a voice or have something to say? I mean, there are a lot of people who don't want to be on boards. I mean, I've always been asked to be on my condo board, my co-op boards in the past, and I'm like, I'm running around the world, I'm busy, I'm too busy, I can't, so I didn't. But, and I
so
respect
you're smart.
Well, whatever, but I respected, my board members in whatever buildings I was living in to do the right thing by me. And quite frankly, maybe I'm the lucky one, but in the buildings that I've lived in, I've never really had any issues from that perspective. But we all know that people complain constantly. Residents are never happy. How do you get them more engaged in buildings from a managing agent perspective if they're not a board member, right? But yet they want to say something or they want to make change.
I think it's important to remind them to
Because they're always going to come and complain to you.
Oh, right? They're always going to complain, but effectively participate in the building. Just because you're not on the board doesn't mean you can't participate.
Right.
Every year, every building has an annual unit owners meeting. Show up to it. Let the neighbors know who you are. When you do have an issue,
read the building minutes.
Read the building minutes. But when you do have an issue, politely write to the board or the management company instead of going, both barrels blasting, ready to attack somebody because you don't like whatever policy was implemented. Right. You can still effectively participate without being on the board and without acting like a maniac and driving everyone crazy and, trying to unionize the building and, get everybody on your side, triangulating between the management company and the board. You can still effectively participate without being a maniac about it. And I think people forget that.
But it's so interesting to me because, when we do a deal, and Ben, you can relate to this, when you're doing a deal, right, and due diligence starts and, you ask the owners of co-ops or even condos, where's the offering plan, where's the proprietary lease, where are your 3 years of financials, and they're like, oh, I don't have any of that stuff. I throw it away. But they mail it to you every year. Yeah, but I don't look at that stuff, or I put it here and I don't know where it is. Gone. So just like when you ask them how much they pay in maintenance every month, the question is, I don't know. It comes out of my checking account every month. Well, okay. Don't you look at your bank statement every month? It's a big amount.
They don't.
Don't you?
They don't.
They
the amount of
not.
scary things I see where we'll do it on a lease. Like, for example, a lot of buildings will charge back the electric on the common charge statement or the maintenance statement.
No idea.
No one looks at it. And then I'll get the apartment to manage. And I'm like, you realize you haven't backcharged your tenant for 2 years worth of utilities? I didn't know that.
Do you want one better than that? A friend of mine, this is years ago, said to me, I live in New York City, but I don't ever pay a cable bill, and I'm not going to call them and remind them. And I'm like,
it's on the common charge bill.
Have you looked at your common charges?
$60 a month.
It's deducted from your Oh, really? And I thought,
No, people throw things on auto pay and they
this
forget.
This is not a stupid person, okay? Still not a stupid. And I'm like, you pay it every month on your common charge bill. You don't know that? Okay. I'm not going to call the cable company because I don't want to get them, start up, whatever. Fine. My point there was minutes. When something comes up because the attorneys are reviewing minutes, and you go back to the seller and say, well, the building, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. You live in the building. How did you not know that? It's a problem, right?
You should know.
Whatever it was uncovered, it's a problem. Now the buyer might have an issue. How did you not know that? Well, I don't go to the meetings. I don't really pay attention. Whatever.
And they send all the emails from the board to spam also. They don't even read, even if it's not the meeting minutes, even if it's an announcement that the building makes that they send everybody an email of, they still ignore it. You've got to effectively participate.
I think communication, and I know we might get into this like a little bit later, is such an interesting, delicate balancing act. Especially if you're in the private sector.
Correct.
And then you're going into, this board because, I think when I first came in best intentions, all rosy-eyed and wanting to have, perfectly transparent and great communication. But there's a lot of the legal factors you want to balance. And at the same time, you have to meet people where they're at, to get them the information so that they are informed and things like that. I mean, communication, I think, is a really interesting topic,
And culture.
Yes. Yeah.
Culture at the top. The board needs to have the right culture, in my opinion. And we very often foster a good culture where there's a lot of communication and socials with the residents so that over time it builds a true community where everybody is friendly. And if you're friends with your neighbor, you're not going to complain. If you're friendly with your property manager, you're not going to complain. Right? So you don't want to complain about your friends.
Or you'll complain effectively, at least. You'll approach it with kindness.
When the woman who used to live
nicer.
on top of me walked in her heels at 2 o'clock in the morning in the bedroom on wooden floors, it's like, yeah, I'm complaining. Get those shoes off at the front door, for heaven's sakes. All right, we got to take a break. We're coming back. We're talking about the book, Living the Highlight. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business, and it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
All right, Tina, a question for you. What are the most common risks associated with owning a co-op or a condo, and how can owners mitigate these risks? I mean, in all buildings, everything, as these guys were talking about, everything and anything can pop up, good or bad, right? Sometimes funny and perplexing. But how do we mitigate some of the risks? What are the risks that can pop up for owners, and then how do we mitigate those going forward to ensure, what do we say, quiet and enjoyable living in your surroundings? Quiet and peaceful living. Thank you.
Yeah. The most common risks are old systems. Old bursting pipes, leaking facades, windows, roofs, parapets. And those can be very expensive to repair.
Parapets are very expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they need to be repaired.
Mm-hmm.
Or failing elevators. And nowadays, one of the biggest risks right now, it's not a risk, but at the same time it is a risk, is the local law 97, where all of these buildings have to be carbon neutral by 2050, and they're facing...
Starting next year, right? 25?
The first fines go into, the law went into effect January this year, and the first fines are being issued next year in 2025. Right. But it's only for 11% of the buildings that are currently not meeting their goals.
Because I think for a lot of people coming in, and Vince, you're kind of asking like, well, what are the risks? But if I'm a consumer listening to this, it's like, well, how do we check and how do we look into those things and how do we know, going into a project? And one of the most interesting, unless you've been through this and really know the nuances, perplexing things, is in 80-90+% of the building's financials, there's a little section about no major future, repairs and replacements, no assessment and building, work has been made, right? And there's a study that if you do the study, all of a sudden your reserve requirements because of these failing systems have to be up. So the advice most buildings get is don't do the study because who has to pay for that increased reserve? Well, the unit owners. So there's not information that's clearly written about all of these systems because of that for most of the buildings. So what do residents do? I mean, we tell them on the front end, like, bring an inspector to inspect also the building, the roof and mechanicals and things like that prior to, actually purchasing your unit, which a lot of times, people don't necessarily do. Reading, I think, the minutes as we, talked about, because you will find a lot of different, things in there. But even still, there's just so much, I think, once you get in that you just don't know. And I'm curious, Tina, from your experience, like, what other things besides those would you advise people to, do and check with, to try and get more of that information?
And it's a great question. And there's a lot of public information that's available, but it's a lot to do. There's HPD, where you can go and you can see complaints from the building. So if there are lots of people who complain about the heat, then there's probably not enough heat. If there are lots of if there's one person who complains 100 times, that might not be so relevant, right? There's also the DOB now, where you can look at certain safety issues. You can look at elevator, boiler, facade, and then of course, if you see a D on your buildings, so there's an energy efficiency grade on every building, and if it says that the building has a D, which is approximately 50% of buildings, then it's not very energy efficient. And
You've got some expenses coming.
Yes, and especially for young buyers who seem to be more like you, seem to be more environmentally conscious.
Yeah.
And they don't want to live in a building that's a D, and that is facing $250,000 in fines starting next year.
Is it true, all of you? I heard something recently that I don't know that I really agree with, but somebody said, most buildings, and I don't know percentage, but most buildings in New York City are not run efficiently, and that runs the gamut, whether it's from an energy perspective, a maintenance perspective, things need to be fixed, a green perspective, but they're just not running efficiently. Is that statistic, most buildings, accurate? What do you think?
It depends on how we're approaching this.
We're a big bad city, right? But New York City is all these boroughs, all these buildings. Thousands of buildings, right? But most buildings are not run efficiently. That
depends what metric you're looking at.
Well,
I think
exactly, and I don't know what that was measured against, because I sit back and say, well, that can't be, right?
Yes.
I review. In my position, I've reviewed, similar to the work that Tina said, because of the nature of the business that I'm in with brokerage, I've actually had the blessing and opportunity to review hundreds and hundreds of building financials.
Sure.
And for the most part, there's a lot of, I think, similarities to them. And you can definitely see the trends and what things are similar, over time. But every building has some unique nuance in its own way. And probably could they all be more energy efficient? Absolutely. Or could they all be, doing a little bit more on the finances side of things? Like, for example, it's a very small percentage of building financials I've seen that actually allocate, a budget line item that's money that's dedicated to go to the reserve. So if we're measuring off that, I'd say, well, there's a lot of inefficiency that, that goes on with these, with these buildings. So I think, there's a lot of ubiquitous things amongst them. They're fairly not that sexy to look at and interesting compared to a company financials, because most of it's hunky-dory, but there's certainly a lot of opportunities to increase things. So
yeah.
How can we go ahead?
So when we look through the financial statements, so we have two services. We have project management, where we manage large projects like electrifying buildings or repairing or working on facade repairs or leak repairs or something. So that's the project management. But then for a cost reduction, our clients that hire us for cost reduction services, we look through the financial statement, not the audited, which is 2 pages. We look through the financial statement.
The details.
From the property manager, which is 150 pages,
Right.
that the board receives the day before their board meeting or the 2 hours before their board meeting every month.
Wow.
We look through,
Yep.
yeah, we look through that
Get
150
good at looking
pages,
through it.
Yeah.
and then we have develop a benchmark based on those. So we look at all of those line items, and we find outliers. And we typically reduce our clients' budget by 5 to 10%. And the most
Budget across the board by 5%, 10%?
5 to 10% in total.
Mm-hmm.
But the most common area, so we'll find in this building it's exterminating service, in this building it's elevator service,
Right.
in this building they have 9 unused phone lines, etc. But then the 4 most common areas where we find savings is heating, water, electricity, and insurance. So every single insurance,
And all of those things recently have escalated to the point of
Substantially.
Wow, substantially.
And I don't know if
They've
you've
been what's caused
heard.
most of the increases.
You probably heard that insurance premiums has like doubled and tripled and all of this.
Oh, they're insane.
Yeah. Every single
You
client.
want my bill?
Every
my personal bill.
not your personal. We don't want.
Okay.
Every single co-op and condo client that we have renewed their insurance this year, since August last year, when everybody started talking about this, every single one we have reduced their insurance premium.
Yeah.
Every single one.
Yeah. So, how do owners, co-op or condo owners, stay informed? I'm a real estate agent, so for me, a little of this is intuitive. Local regulations, zoning changes, and other factors that may impact the value or the security of their investment. Again, as we said, most owners or residents in a building don't pay attention to that stuff. You ask them about zoning stuff, what does that mean? You ask them about local regulations, what does that mean? You talk about local law 97, huh? What? So how can you get them to kind of focus on, and I guess my point there is to help the board members who are working their tail off to get things done properly listen, I joked about maybe off air or on air, I don't remember anymore, but that not wanting to be on a board, but it's not that I think board members don't do their job. I think they do a Herculean, job in trying to get the building righted in some cases and get it, on the right track. And to just keep the protections for all residents in place. But, sometimes I still keep going back to residents have a responsibility also. So what is it, or what does it take to get them to understand that this stuff is important? They call the managing agent, they complain. They call board members or they bump into them in the elevator and they complain. And my point is, okay, I hear it all the time, right? And I'm like, okay, why don't you get on the board? Fix it. How do they get informed about these things? Regulation, zoning, it's important.
I think most importantly, working with a management company who knows what they're doing. There's 1,000 property management companies here in the city.
Yes, there are.
And it's important that you have somebody who follows regulations, who understands what's happening zoning-wise, who understands, all these pipeline, requirements that we're going to have. Because the amount of, in a lot of cases, the board is being kind of piloted by the management company. And if you have an unqualified manager or a lackluster manager or an irresponsible manager that doesn't follow current events in real estate, then there's no chance the board will ever be able to, proceed on the right direction because they're not being guided properly. And I think a lot of this is you need a management company who knows what they're doing and can help guide the building and help kind of delineate a lot of this, the agendas. Okay, guys, I know that we want to talk about this, but hey, this is coming up next month. There's a building that we manage a very large apartment in over on the west side, and the management company's there. They don't do anything. Meanwhile, we have about a $5 million assessment coming up because the building leaks so much, and the management company just sat on the sidelines while, everybody's asset just is being artificially devaluated because it's just not being taken care of. And I think that's a start, finding a management company that's going to help you because somebody needs to guide the board, and the blind can't lead the blind. It results in disaster.
You're absolutely correct. Perfect segue, because I was going to ask Ben. I work in a building on Midtown West, and I've sold all these units, 108 units from brand new, floor plans, whatever.
The 505?
Correct,
Oh,
the 505.
Yeah.
And so I'm still in that building all these years later. But, through the years, parapet walls, roof, membrane, all of that stuff started leaking. You need to replace whatever. And, the residents always come to me because, my plaque is on the wall in the lobby that, I own this building.
With the bust also, hopefully?
That they didn't get there yet,
Okay.
but I'm sure that's next. But the plaque on the wall with my name on it, okay? And I joke, but it's whatever.
Yep.
Bottom line is, they say to me, how could this be? How could we have this because they got a major $3.5 or $4 million assessment a year and a half ago to fix the roof? Is it the board's fault? It is the managing agent's fault? And they're both going back and forth over. And I tell them all the time, listen, if you go to board meetings, because I attend them sometimes, the room is empty. Where is everybody? You hear these things. You know that there are leaks in the building. Go to the meetings and voice your opinion. So if the board is making a decision, or the managing agent is making a decision, or they're agreeing with each other that this has to happen, you have nothing to say. What are you going to say about it? How do we get to that point from a board member perspective where major assessments go on, major millions of dollars, And the board's looking at the managing agent's looking at the board. It's your fault. It's my fault. It's your fault. It's my fault. Whose fault is it?
Yeah. So I think
Is it anybody's
I think it's Mother Nature's fault when it comes to the roof. But the
Spoken like a true board member. Mother Nature's fault. There you go.
Well, let's go to like the root of this issue. That's why I always try and reiterate, what's your North Star, right? And the North Star is what's best for the building. Because a lot of times I think we get conflated with different things. And I'll give a very recent example because we're having to go through it with my roof in one of my buildings as we speak. And in planning financials accordingly, setting yourself up to put some money aside for future repairs and things that are going to, go on, a lot of times are unpopular decisions because what does that do? It increases, your maintenance or common charges in the building.
Yeah.
So, but truly the best thing to do is keep some of those small regular increases to, I think, plan for the future. Understand that, hey, everything has, just like Tina was saying, a useful life. It's not anybody's fault. I mean, we should be checking, and with the super and having reports and understanding when these things are going to go. And a lot of times, and I'll give the example with my roof, we went up there with a few professionals and I was there with them, up on the roof and going through and inspecting different things. And, there's the options of like, hey, we can do some of the light patchwork, but just know that there's all these other like major things wrong with the roof because it was done however many years ago that at some point the whole thing's going to go even if you do the light patchwork. So it's the easy thing to do to keep people's maintenance and expenses down.
Right.
Is to do the light patchwork and all that sort of stuff. The harder decision is to do what's really necessary for the building and what's best for the long term. And again, if you go back to that North Star, I think, a lot of these decisions get made, a whole lot easier. And those are hard decisions. They're not easy decisions because they're unpopular sometimes, but they are what's best for the building long term.
You bring up a good point. I call them the Band-Aid issues. We'll fix something temporarily just for a little while, which, is a good strategy if you're trying to keep the maintenance down, trying not to add an assessment to their monthly bills. But then it comes to a point where this building at 505,
all of a
honestly, they did that for years until it got to the point where, hey, we can't Band-Aid anymore. We really now have to get this fixed.
Well, life is going to force you to.
Well, and it did. And then we had a couple of bad winter last year or whatever between rain and snow and whatever. Not a lot of snow, but like ice and stuff. That really, killed the infrastructure up there. And so now, a year and a half later, and they're still repairing the roof. I mean, what's ironic, the building is only 14 years old. It's not even an old building. So lots of money now. And what happens? You assess a building, their monthlies get increased. So between the assessment and the increase in common charges, which, by the way, I was going to ask you if you know the number, or I'm hearing things like 10 and 12 and 13% increases in common charges this past couple of years.
We had a 70% increase in a building this year.
70?
I saw 70%, I saw 45%, I saw 30%. You can kick the can down the road as long as you want, but at some point there's going to be a reckoning. And with all of the inflation we had over the past few years, plus increases in everything, Mother Nature is obviously not cooperating with us. Where every time it rains now, you need a canoe to get down Fifth Avenue. There's going to be a reckoning, and if you don't pay attention as you go, you're going to wake up and have it. And how do you explain to your fellow residents that you have a 70% common charge increase?
You know what I would do? Unplug the phones.
and hire
You're going to
security.
get major phone calls on us. I've never even heard of that.
Oh,
That's
it's
amazing.
happening. Well, and I'm seeing a lot, like not as many 70%, but the amount of double-digit increases I saw this year. We operated at about 300 different buildings. The amount of double-digit and like north of 20 or 30% was like flabbergasting. Like, was nobody planning? Was nobody? What happened? Everybody had their head in the sand the past 10 years, and all of a sudden, at some point, those patches aren't going to work, and you've got to replace the roof, and it is what it is.
Tina, talk a little bit about some of the unseen circumstances, such as natural disasters and financial instability in a building. Whether it's building management, whether it's the board, whether it's just Mother Nature, whatever. Do you, in your consulting practice in buildings, talk to them about keeping money aside? What do we used to say? Money over here for a rainy day, right? How do boards and buildings plan for natural disasters? I mean, hurricanes, tornadoes, major flooding, global warming, whatever you want to label it. Do buildings today kind of keep that in mind and think about that, or do they not? and then run into trouble and say, Tina, help.
Well, when they
I
have...
suspect it's the latter.
Yes.
Probably the latter.
Yes. Normally, when the balconies are falling off the facade, that's when they
Correct.
call us. They don't call us when...
When the balconies are falling.
Oh, it's happening.
Of course it is. Yeah.
111.
So
you're
they
positive.
normally don't call us when it's not urgent. So you're never going to believe this, but our cost reduction service, which we thought would be the easiest sell on the planet because it doesn't cost anybody anything, it's not urgent. Our projects where they have to pay up front is normally that's when they call us because there's an emergency. And now all of a sudden they have to do something. But back to your question. So
Makes sense.
it's completely up to a board. And we don't, I mean, when we reduce their expenses, they say, should we reduce our common charges or maintenance? And we said, no. You're going to use that to reinvest in the building. You're going to keep it the same, but you're going to reinvest it in the building. That's our
Capital
advice.
Reserve Fund, hello.
Yes. When it comes to having money in the capital reserve, it's some boards feel one way, other boards feel the other way. And I mean, that's just like anything else in life. That 50% feels this way and 50%. It's my opinion that boards know where everybody lives. So assessing when on an as-needed basis, I mean, yes, they can warn about it, but...
Yeah. All right, listen, we have to take a quick break. This is Talking New York Real Estate. All right, and we're back. So, Ben, let me ask you, though, because insurance, Tina mentioned before how the cost of, energy and insurance and water and all that stuff has increased, year over year for a whole bunch of reasons, but significantly lately. So when boards of condos or even co-ops are looking at insurance, A, what kind of insurance is necessary in a building, and B, what are the costs these days and how much have they risen from your perspective?
So, and I'll be definitely curious Tina's take on this as well. When it comes to insurance, the biggest miss I see from people, well, there's really two misses. You don't know how good insurance is until you actually need to use it, first of all.
Correct.
So having an insurance, we talked about the trusted advisors that, a managing agent or whoever is setting you up with, like really making sure that you have the right insurance and insurance company and you're doing your due diligence on that because, just because you're saving money or insurance is cheap doesn't mean anything if you run into a problem and they're not paying or you have to fight for something or whatever the case might be. So I see that become, a big issue. The second is people, in order to reduce their costs, grossly underestimate like repair and rebuild, costs, whether it's their own personal apartment or, potentially for a building. And that's one area that, again, you really don't want to skimp on. It's one of those areas that can drastically fluctuate the insurance cost and bill. I mean, in my opinion, because if you were talking about natural disaster and some of those types of things, if that happens and you're there, that's a pretty big issue. And an inexpensive one, again, both personal and for the building, is really like the liability side of things. And there's ways to insulate an umbrella and like do different things to give yourself more liability without necessarily adding a lot to the cost. I definitely have seen insurance costs go up. Have some really great insurance providers that, like Tina said, have been able to keep costs reasonable and keep costs, down. So you really got to have, I think the right insurance person these days on that front. But I'm curious what you see as well. You probably get into the weeds of that a little more than I do.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we work with a handful of insurance brokers who then go to the handful available insurance carriers that are available to New York City co-op and condos or multifamily properties. So there's not that much selection when it comes to the underwriter, but the broker really makes the difference. And we have some relationships that we worked with for as long as we've been around, for the last 10 years. And they've really done a very fantastic job for us. They typically specialize in properties. So that's their specialty. They don't do all of these other insurances. They're not targeted. Their specialty is co-ops and condos or rental property owners. And because they have done a good job for us and they're willing to take, they know our model that we get compensated based on savings. So they are not trying to not negotiate the insurance premium every year. So therefore, we don't work with brokers who do not negotiate every year, because then they're not working in the best interest of our clients. So we've seen some big savings. Now, how much the board is willing to take on, that's up to them. But if they are willing to pay more for a higher deductible, etc., that's up to them. But we have seen deductibles go down over the last 10 years, and we have also, we have one building, our first building, has had no increases in their insurance for the last 10 years because the broker presented the building in a way, and they have done all the upgrades that the underwriter required to make it more insurable.
That's great.
That's interesting. I mean, you work with a really good real estate agent. You're not going to necessarily get a discount on buying an apartment in town, right? I love that. Let me ask you something, Dylan. So
Depends if they're a good negotiator for
if
you,
they're
though.
good negotiators.
Yes,
Come on,
yes.
But
Yes.
yes, no, I know. But just in general,
I
right?
know.
But so how involved does managing agent get in the insurance conversations with buildings? Because of course it increases, common charges or maintenance potentially, right?
Yeah, I think the management company should always be very involved in the insurance process, because I think people's natural inclination in life is they get 3 quotes and you go with the cheapest. But with insurance, there's 3 things we don't save money on in life: sushi, plastic surgery, and insurance. Like, it'll bite you every time. That's my own philosophy.
Okay.
It'll bite you every time. And look, if
Now I'm curious what plastic surgery you've done.
I'm actually much older than I look.
Okay.
No, but somebody told me
Not.
that. I don't have too much experience with that one.
He's
but,
lying.
But all insurance policies aren't the same. And if I pay $1,000 a year to an insurance company,
Yeah.
but it covers nothing, did I save myself any money or did I hurt myself? And everybody wants to balk at the cost, but managing agents have to be well versed on these topics. Otherwise, how are they guiding the board? Because the broker is going to present options, and the management agent always chimes in with an opinion. So if you're not well versed on it, then you're not doing anybody favors. And if you're going strictly on price, all the insurance policies aren't equal. You're not getting Chubb and Travelers and Geico aren't giving you the same policy. The differences in the premium are what's being excluded from the policy.
Yeah.
So if I have a claim and you're going to tell me no and claim act of God every time I give you a claim and you're not going to pay it, then I'm just wasting money. Like, we need an insurance policy that when we need it, it's going to be effective and we'll actually pay the claim.
All right, in the post-COVID era, it seems like there is an increase in impatience across the board. People living in a building, people running boards, people managing buildings. Everybody these days thinks about or wants to become litigious. I mean, it just seems like more than ever, the impatience is unbelievable. How then do you manage that within a building? I mean, just talking to your neighbors sometimes, it's like you can tell that they're ticked off about something, and whether it's job-related, family-related, or building-related, it's kind of like, well, I never saw that person kind of act like that before. So how then will they be managing our building necessarily, or how then will they make sure that everything here is okay? I mean, from a board perspective, Ben, or just people in general, what is still the reason for, I guess, the level of impatience that has grown, in society, I guess, and how can we best manage it or keep it, to a level in building living where it's manageable?
Yeah, I think you have to be very real. During the pandemic, more people had to deal with death,
Yeah.
Whether it's, death, sick family, or maybe it's created some financial constraints. And when you stack all these things on top, you just really have no idea where everybody's at and what are the things that they are
Right.
dealing with, outside. And
Loss
so
of work, loss of jobs.
Absolutely. And so, and everybody's got their own stuff with board members and things like that they have to deal with. And when you don't have, I think, the time to give someone an ability to meet them where they're at and some type of level of understanding that might be, going on, if you can do that, you can have some grace and some calm in how you're handling situations, community, and, like Tina was mentioning before. are, I think, really the keys to just be able to make sure all the sides are heard, that they have a voice. You don't make assumptions because someone's acting like that because they might have some of those things going on in their life. And when people don't do that, the only way they can communicate is by an attorney, and that's not, that's not the most effective, at all. And so once that trust is lost and the desire, I think, meet people where they're at, then, it starts getting pushed and forced to that, legal side of things. And, if you can avoid that, that's always a much better route. So.
It's interesting to me because sometimes, as we talked about, off camera here earlier, there sometimes might be one board member who is holding up a decision, a major decision, whether it's a financial decision or whatever. How do board members then get or make that one person who's being difficult kind of relax their very strong opinion? Do you try to get them to understand what everybody else on the board wants or what the residents are asking for? Or is it kind of like, all right, it's a stalemate, that's it, and not going to change?
I have.
Go ahead. Go.
Listen to why are they asking that one person, why is it that you feel so strongly about this? And then listening. Because if you know the reasoning for that particular viewpoint, then it might be something that you can work around.
But what if it's not a reasonable, issue? Yeah, what if it's something that's just, this is what I want, this is what I believe, or this is what I think the right way to do it is, but you say, okay, but that's not really kind of reasonable, and here are my reasons for saying that to you. And you still have that.
I've had multiple buildings and both boards I've been on where there's like, I call it, there's, what would be the best word to use here? For a certain number of units, I'd say for every 50 units, there's one or two, very animated, fixed mindset, let's call it, people who get dug into their ways and can be very, loud voices. Sometimes they're on the board, sometimes they're sitting in the meeting, voicing things up. We actually had one where we had a building vote to remove one of the board members, and it was funny because everybody except one or two people voted to remove that board member who was basically that person, but they didn't even vote for themselves, which was really interesting.
Okay.
And in those instances, like the dynamics of the board, how many board members there are, because a lot of times it's, if you have 5, then a lot of times it's 3 votes to be able to get something done. So it's not so much that board member, but who are your other parties, who are the people that are willing to listen, that are willing to like change their opinion on things, flip sides with stuff. Like I'm happy to do what I can and dedicate any time to people who are collaborative in the board. But when you have people that aren't willing to do that and that number or ratio gets out of whack, so if you have 7 board members and, there's 2 people that are really fixed like that, and then, there's 2 more people that just like are going to listen to whatever those people say, and no one's willing to like hear each other out or work together, like that's incredibly frustrating. And sometimes it goes to those extreme instances like a vote. So. And
that is one I have in this book. There are tips on how to take over the board to have everybody on the same page.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to read something here. A high-functioning board is critical
to the success. I've been a part of the mutinies. I hate them. They're so stressful.
Correct. A high-functioning board is critical to the success of a co-op or a condo. A board that functions well can provide strong leadership, strategic direction, and overall oversight. Additionally, a high-functioning board can help the association achieve its goals and its objectives. That is, of course, assuming the board has goals and has objectives. Okay, so that kind of gets to where we were talking before. What are the goals and what are the objectives that a board has, and do they come from the residents? Do they come from the managing agent? Does it come from a collection of people? Because a board can be everything to a building, but do they have the focus? Do they have the objectives? If there's that one person who's like, nope, I don't want this, or maybe multiple people who don't want that, you got to kind of work around in a group to get them all, and that's when the managing agent gets involved. That's when at board meetings, whether they're monthly or quarterly or annually or whatever they are, you start hearing about the yelling and the screaming. I mean, I've been to board meetings where they're not comfortable. I mean, on a lot of levels, they're just not comfortable. right?
Yeah.
What's the resolve?
And if you are rational, get involved in the board as well. Like run for the board. And if you have a different, and I think a lot of you have these old school. If
rational.
you have all these old school board members, and they've been on the board forever, and they run the building. Everything kind of goes to them. But as population and building changes, and the market changes, like the building's going to fluctuate as well.
So if I'm going to pose a challenge there, because I've seen the evolutions of this on boards and recently too, I find there's people in two camps in a building: people that don't have enough time and people that have too much time.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of the rational people don't have enough time.
They have other things to do.
They have
That's the problem.
things to do.
Yeah.
And so then when they get involved, it's this huge stress because then you're dealing with people who are irrational. So like, how do you marry those two? It's not an easy.
No, we have a board member in our building who needs to be overthrown. Basically, the person's running the building into the ground, making rules, but nobody else wants to get involved because of that.
And that's my point. So aside from coming in to consult from a financial perspective or anything else, there's that one person or two sometimes, and they need to go. People want to vote them out. It's not good for the building. It's hurting the integrity of the building, the health of the building. But until that person goes, we see that in politics all the time. But it resides in co-op and condo boards as well. So it's a problem.
It is a problem. But
they're not all like this guy.
Yeah. And we get calls from board members who say, we can't get anything done because we have this one person.
Correct.
And I'll say, I'll send you my book. And you talk to all the board members except for that one person, and then let me know when your next annual meeting is, and then call me after your new meeting when you have gotten rid of that person and now you can get stuff done.
Yeah.
From your mouth to God's ears. One last question. In all buildings, how difficult is it to maintain resident privacy? If I get any complaints in a lot of the buildings that I work in, and I'm, just walking the halls or sitting in the lobby sometimes during open house, and people come up to me and say, privacy in this building is just not what it's supposed to be. And I hear this a lot. And I always think to myself, well, you're living in a building of 100 people, 100 units, so hundreds of people. What kind of privacy are you looking for? Close your door, lock your door, and you got all the privacy you need.
Well, that's my clarifying question: is what type of privacy exactly are you referring to?
I never get an answer when I ask the question.
Well, I mean, the way I look at that
people
is
looking at you in the elevator, walk on the stairs, take the stairs.
Right. I mean, look, those types of issues, it's like harder to comment how to handle. I don't know really what the solution would be, but there are some very particular things that if the board follows, again, what's in the offering plan, listen to the building attorney, that I think are very easy to keep. For example, when you're reviewing, financials every month, there are sometimes residents who are in arrears, not paying their common charges or maintenance.
Correct.
That is a typical example where like, hey, we want to have very transparent, we want to have open communication, but you're not going to, put people's names in the minutes, for that type of thing. No. You have to be like delicate with how you handle some of, that information and people's privacy, because that could impact, some other areas. And so you really need to follow the right advice in those areas and not broadcast different things. So I think that is, one of the most important, things. Like, what are you writing up in the minutes? What are you telling to the building? What are you saying about that stuff? You have to, as a board member, as you learn, as you get more involved, there's just some things you just can't talk about in terms of what, has gone on. A domestic abuse, violence in an apartment that you have to handle. But, someone saying something to you, you have to, keep tight-lipped about it. So I think those are the real privacy issues, if I were to categorize them. Not like something that someone doesn't like you and you see them in the elevator, like
take the stairs.
Yeah,
as I tell them all the time. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Ben Willig, Dylan Pichulik, and Tina Larson, thank you so much for being with us today. The book again is Living the High Life. Buy it. It's available anywhere you buy your books, including Amazon. We'll be right back with my closing remarks. Don't go anywhere. Okay, everybody, my closing remarks for this week. Protecting your investment in condos and co-ops requires diligent attention to various factors. First, a thorough research into the financial health and management of the condominium association or cooperative is crucial. This includes examining financial statements, reserve funds, and the history of assessments. Additionally, understanding the governing documents such as bylaws, rules, and regulations is essential to ensure compliance and avoid unexpected costs or conflicts. Regularly attending association or cooperative board meetings allows for active participation in decision-making processes and staying informed about any upcoming changes or issues that may affect your investment. Maintain open communication with fellow unit owners or shareholders fosters a sense of community and cooperation, which can be beneficial in addressing common concerns and protecting the collective interest of all stakeholders. And obtaining appropriate insurance coverage, including liability and property insurance, helps mitigate potential financial losses due to unforeseen events such as natural disasters or accidents. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok at Vince Rocco, or my website, thinkvince.com. And keep your eyes on the stars, but keep your feet on the ground. And from all of us here at Talking New York and the More Network to all of you around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.